Hi there, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mengs, and I am so excited to bring you guys this new Fire Emblem character spotlight. Binding Blade is my favorite game in the series, so every time someone requests me to cover a character from that game, I always leap with joy. I had a ton of fun creating the spotlight, and I hope you'll have an equally fun time watching it. So without further ado, today we are spotlighting the Etrurian gladiator Dieck. And before we begin, just pause this video and go ahead and leave a dick joke in the comment section right away so you get it out of your system. Okay, done? Cool. Then we can begin. Dieck is an Etrurian gladiator who grew up fighting in the arenas of Aquileia. From a very young age, he became famous as a skilled sword fighter capable of defeating men twice his size. One day, however, something happened that would change his life forever. In one of Aquileia's biggest arenas, during an opening show featuring wild lions who had been captured for entertainment, one of the beasts broke free from captivity and charged right at a young boy in the audience. Dieck reacted quicker than anyone else in the arena and immediately got between the lion and the child. While he usually had few problems dispatching enemy gladiators, the lion nearly killed him, leaving grievous wounds on his body as well as terrible scars on his face. But luckily, the boy was unharmed. This boy turned out to be of noble birth. His name was Klein, the son of the Count and Countess of Rigley, Pent and Louise. After this incident, Pent decided to hire Dieck as Klein's personal bodyguard. Dieck continued to do battle in arenas in the Rigley family's name and acquired a lot of recognition as a result, especially after the incident with the lion, which made him very famous. However, to Pent and Louise, Dieck was more than just their hired goon. They practically raised him as their own son. In particular, Dieck forged a strong, almost brotherly bond with Klein. Taking a lowborn commoner into their house caused the Rigley family to receive a lot of scorn from the rest of the Etrurian high nobility, who viewed it as distasteful and a breach of etiquette. Pent and Louise didn't really seem to mind, but as Dieck grew older, he felt he was bringing shame on the family that had raised him, and once he had gained enough gold to buy his own freedom, he left them to strike out on his own. Klein took his departure particularly hard and felt as if his own brother had abandoned him. With swordplay being his only real skill, it was only natural for Dieck to become a mercenary. He traveled all across Alib, taking contracts along his journey. He would visit places like the Western Isles, and even took assignments all the way down in Bern, where he nearly ended up getting himself killed after taking on a job from a merchant who sought to use him and the rest of the mercenaries as cannon fodder. Eventually, Dieck formed his own mercenary company consisting of 2 fighters from the Western Isles, Lot and Wade, as well as a young Pegasus knight in training from Ilia, Shanna. This mercenary group would eventually be contacted by none other than the Marquis of Farah himself, Lord Eliwood, who hired Dieck's mercenaries to assist his son Roy in joining up with the rest of the Lycian Alliance. Growing up in the fighting pits of Etruria, Dieck is tough as nails. He can be foul in his language and rough around the edges, but behind the stern facade there's a deeper sense of loyalty and honor to Dieck that is quite unusual for a mercenary and gladiator. The fact that he willingly put himself between a child and a charging lion, a death sentence for most men, shows us that he had virtue and empathy even as a young teenager. Dieck also has an uncharacteristic affection for the mercenaries under his command, visibly showing that he cares about them and wants them to stay alive and be well, also shown in the game itself by the fact that he can support with everyone in his mercenary squad. In his support with Wade, he clearly shows his protective side when he scorns the young fighter for his reckless behavior, despite Wade insisting there's no one out there who can take him down. However, when Wade later experiences a close encounter with death, he comes crawling back to Dieck, admitting that he needs to be more careful and thanking him for imparting the harsh lesson on him before it was too late. When Dieck responds by giving him some light praise due to his immense strength, Wade finds it rather awkward but thanks him all the same, which leads to Dieck telling him to shut up, ending the support on a rough but funny note. In his support with Lot, the more level-headed of the 2 fighters, they discuss their newest employer, Roy. While they both agree that Roy is young, maybe a bit too young, they also think he is quite impressive for his age, as he shows compassion for all those under his command, even the mercenaries. Dieck then shows the big contrasts between his employers by telling Lot about the time he was hired by a rich merchant in Bern, who used the mercenaries as living shields to get away safely from his attackers, while arrows rained down upon them. Dieck ended up being the sole survivor of the group, more due to luck than anything else. He also reveals that back then, he was only concerned with spreading his fame, and would take on highly risky missions just for the sake of glory. In his support with Shanna, the young Pegasus Knight complains that she feels left out of the gang, as she isn't allowed to call Dieck her bro like Wade a lot does. Dieck won't really go into detail as to why she's not allowed to do that, but insists that she just uses his real name. Dieck also once again assumes an overprotective role in the support as he chastises Shanna for flying off on her own without relying on the support of the rest of the squad. She initially argues that she is a flyer and she shouldn't limit her mobility by hanging around the slow fighters, but Dieck insists that she's no good to anyone dead. When she eventually agrees to his commands, Dieck then suddenly turns around and tells her in their A support that she can't trust her employer blindly either, sort of contrasting what he said earlier about her needing to follow his advice. This initially confuses Shanna a little, but it later becomes clear what Dieck is doing when he tells her that she needs to be skeptical around her employers, as Dieck could very well be giving her commands just to ensure his own safety. This makes sense, as Dieck has experience being treated like cannon fodder by earlier employers in the past, and his skepticism might have been what saved his life, a valuable lesson he is now trying to impart to Shanna. Shanna argues that there's no way Dieck would ever do such a thing to either her, Lot, or Wade, and that with Dieck, they truly can entrust their lives to him. Dieck then responds by telling her not to get cocky, which is a bit of an odd response, but Shanna's laughter probably indicates that she is sort of teasing Dieck for being a softie, something he is not overly proud of showing. Dieck's affiliation with Wade, Lot, and Shanna is not your traditional commander-subordinate relationship. They are a lot more like a family than they are a mercenary group. In their interactions, it's clear that Dieck cares deeply for his squad, but at the same time he's also worried that their close relationship might harm them in the future. If either of his mercenaries strike out on their own and show the same level of trust and conviction to a future employer that treats them like disposable troops, their leniency could easily get them killed, and thus Dieck attempts to occasionally scold and discipline them when they get too close to him. Continuing with Dieck's other supports, in his interactions with Clarine, we mostly get exposition from his pasts, as Clarine figures out who he is and realizes she is talking to the man who saved her brother's life, which causes her to follow him around everywhere to learn more about Klein's childhood. Dieck initially tries to get her to leave by acting rude and using foul language, knowing that Clarine is a delicate, pretentious noble girl who might shy away from such behavior, but he completely underestimates what Clarine is willing to go through in order to get information about her brother, and eventually he has to give up and tell her the story about how he saved Klein. Dieck is also completely unable to fathom how Pent and Louise could have such a noisy, bratty child. Dieck's support with Rutger is an odd one, and focuses mostly on the young Myrmidon, displaying a side of him that we don't really get to see anywhere else. It begins with Rutger sneaking up on Dieck, attacking him from behind. This visibly startles the mercenary, but Rutger insists on doing it, as he finds the other members of Roy's army boring, and he wants to test his mettle against a seasoned veteran. Dieck appears rather unsettled by this, but Rutger sees through his ruse, stating that there's no way Dieck would ever let his blade touch him. The support then takes a dark turn, as Rutger is visibly upset for some reason, but he won't say why. Dieck, however, correctly guesses the reason right away, that Rutger must have seen a familiar face amongst the enemy ranks, and this turns out to be correct. However, by the time Rutger got to his familiar face, Dieck had already cut him down. It turns out that this guy was one of the soldiers leading the attack on Rutger's hometown of Bulgar, located in Sakai, which butchered a big majority of the population. Dieck apologizes for depriving Rutger of his revenge, but Rutger doesn't really seem to mind. The support ends with Rutger explaining how he survived the attack. He was spared by the burned soldiers because he didn't look Sakayan. This due to him being of mixed blood, but in Rutger, the burned side came out stronger. Rutger states how he won't rest until he kills every last burned soldier he encounters. It ends with Dieck pledging his support, stating that he'll help Rutger get his revenge, and the two of them form a strong friendship. This support really shows how perceptive Dieck can be, another one of his great qualities, as he correctly guesses why Rutger is upset right from the get-go. It's also clear that Rutger admires Dieck greatly, as he views him not only as his equal, but possibly even his superior. Finally, Dieck's support with Klein is probably his most important one. It begins with Dieck being overprotective of Klein, as he usually is with the people he cares about, telling him to stay in the back and cover him rather than fight on the front lines. Klein insists there's no need for Dieck to treat him like a child anymore, but Dieck explains that if Klein gets hurt, he wouldn't know what to say to Pent or Louise. When Klein then tells him he should come back to the mansion after the war, Dieck immediately shoots him down, telling him that the only reason they are talking is because they are fighting in a war together, and that normally Klein should never lower himself to talk to a commoner. The support then ends with Klein telling the story about the gladiator and the lion, which we already know at this point, and finishing by saying that he really missed Dieck back home at the Riegele mansion and wants him to come back. And an incredibly rare show of humility, Dieck agrees that he's been acting selfish, and promises Klein that he will visit Pent and Louise after the war is over. One thing that is incredibly frustrating about this support is that despite Dieck reaching an A support with Klein, something that would normally qualify him for a paired alternate ending, nothing changes and his ending remains the same. It is never really mentioned if he keeps his promise to Klein and visits the Riegele mansion, which is either an oversight by the developers or it could simply mean that Dieck lied and never had any intentions of returning home with Klein at all. Anyway, this support is quite sad, but it also reveals much more about Dieck's backstory than any other support conversation he has. Most of the points have already been mentioned multiple times already, so I don't think it bars repeating, but one thing I do want to talk about briefly is how this support reveals some rather troubling aspects of Pent and Louise's parenting. It has already been pointed out several times by the community how reckless it is for Louise to literally fight a fire-breathing dragon in blazing sword while she's knowingly pregnant with Klein, as revealed in her and Pent's fixed support conversation that can only be activated in the very final chapter, but this support takes it a step further. Fire Emblem is based in a medieval universe where children grow up fast, and regular standards regarding parenting doesn't necessarily hold up here, but for Louise and Pent to take a 6-year-old Klein to a gladiator arena where men and animals are killed for sport seems not only like a pretty bad idea, but also one must ask how in the world Klein got into a situation where there was nothing between him and a charging lion in the first place. Even if it broke free from a cage, did Pent and Louise let a 6-year-old boy wander freely around the backstage in a fighting pit? In addition to this, we also learn in the same support that even when there's a coup going on in Etruria and their children are literally fighting in a war, Klein states that Pent and Louise hardly seems to care at all, which makes them come across as pretty fucking awful parents. I hate to say it, because I love the Riegele family to death, but it suddenly makes a whole lot of more sense why Clarine decided to run away from home. Man, this sort of makes me sad. Let's move on. On the official Japanese website, Dieck ranked as the 9th most popular Binding Blade character in the game. The reasons for Dieck's popularity, according to the voter comments, generally focused on his brave and strong personality as a warrior and his character design. Even though his in-game portrait and official artwork depicts him as topless, his combat sprite is clearly wearing body armor. Despite being Klein's former bodyguard, Dieck is unable to recruit Klein in the chapter he appears in. Dieck ranked number 209 in the first Fire Emblem Heroes Choose Your Legends popularity poll and number 239 in the second. At the time of making the spotlight, he's yet to be added into Heroes. After the war, Dieck disbanded his mercenary band and decided to travel alone for a while. The reasons for this are never explained. Despite this, he continued to fight in many battles, spawning many legends about his legendary swordsmanship, like one time where an entire legion of soldiers fled upon seeing him on the battlefield. Beyond that, his fate is unknown. We don't know if he eventually settled down or died on the battlefield. Dieck joins your party as early as Chapter 2, coming in from the southern part of the battlefield as a blue unit alongside the rest of his mercenary company. Dieck immediately comes in handy as you can move him to the eastern forts where he has little issue dispatching the incoming fighters, and can even one-round them with his iron blade, and even go toe-to-toe against lance-wielding soldiers despite the weapon triangle disadvantage, though he won't really be able to deal with the ones wielding javelins as well. Dieck can also dispatch the boss of the chapter if you give him the armor slayer obtained in the northwestern village, which you can always pick up with Shanna and have it ferried across the mountains if you want to save time. Despite the weapon triangle disadvantage, Dieck can double and even one-round the boss on normal mode with little difficulty. Statistically, Dieck is a very solid unit that is useful from the moment he arrives. He joins as a level 5 mercenary with fantastic base stats. With 9 base strength and 10 base speed, he hits incredibly hard with his iron blade and is fast enough to double practically all regular enemies for several chapters to come. On hard mode, Dieck will start off doubling reliably at the map he joins, but will quickly start struggling after a few chapters as enemy stats starts to rapidly increase. Dieck's high base skill of 12 combined with the high hit rate of swords makes him very reliable, and allows him to have a fair chance of hitting enemies even at a weapon triangle disadvantage. In addition to his solid bases, Dieck also joins with C rank in swords, which allows him to wield armor slayers, killing edges, steel blades, and other swords right off the bat. Offensively, Dieck is quite impressive, but defensively, he's a little bit of a glass cannon, with 5 luck, 6 defense, and 1 resistance. While this is somewhat remedied by his high base hit points of 26, he'll still fall quickly if you leave him in range of too many enemies at once. Another great selling point for Dieck is his high constitution of 13. While this makes him a bit hard to rescue and ferry around with your other units, which can end up reducing his mobility somewhat, it also allows him to wield steel swords and iron blades without any penalties. With the iron blade he comes equipped with, Dieck can deal an impressive 18 base damage right off the bat. Blades are very effective against high hit point units like fighters and brigands, who Dieck have few problems hitting in the first place, and armed with an iron or even the steel blade obtained in Chapter 4, Dieck can make short work of these units, sometimes even on hard mode, though blades are not going to be very reliable against units like cavaliers, so you best stick to more accurate weapons going up against them unless you like to gamble. Dieck also sports very respectable growth rates. He has an absolutely beastly 90% HP growth, and his 40% growths in strength and skill are also very decent by Binding Blade standards, where growth rates are low on average compared to the other Game Boy Advance games. His speed growth of 30% is a little bit on the low side and might hamper his doubling capabilities on hard mode in the mid-game, but for normal mode it's usually good enough to consistently double everyone but the most fast enemies like mercenaries and nomads. Lastly, Dieck's defense and resistance growths are rather terrible, but this is somewhat remedied by his promotion gains. Once Dieck becomes a hero, he gets a substantial boost in most of his stats, but with a particularly impressive increase to his bulk, with 4 extra hit points, 4 extra points of defense, and 2 extra resistance. He also gains E rank in axes, which allows him a 1-2 range option in the hand axe, though Binding Blade hand axes are atrociously unreliable at 50% hit, so it's not a very good option, but at least it's better than being a sitting duck on enemy face. Because of the benefits Dieck gets from his promotion, don't be afraid to early promote him, as the short-term benefits easily outweigh the long-term losses. Naturally, Dieck is not without his weak spots. Being swordlock pre-promotion does suck when Binding Blade's midgame features a crap ton of lance-wielding cavaliers, armor knights, and soldiers, and his lack of a mount hampers him on the game's huge maps. By the time you promote Dieck to a hero, the game's difficulty curve starts to even out, and his performance starts to be matched by your other units in your party, which makes him seem less like an amazing unit that carries your team, and more like just another face in your army. By no means will Dieck ever be a subpar unit if you put some effort into training him, but he's not bound to be your MVP throughout the entire game either when you get units like Percival and Melody joining later on. But that being said, he still carries your team throughout the early game alongside Marcus and Rutger, particularly on hard mode, where you sometimes require 3 to 4 of your weaker units to gang up on a single enemy to take it down, and in such situations it's really nice to have a blade-wielding mercenary one-rotting a fighter from max health like it's no big deal. Take good care of this Etrurian bad boy and he'll be sure to prevent any charging lions from tearing your face off. Binding Blade characters get very few lines in the main story itself, and their supports are often incredibly short. For this reason, there are very few characters in the game that blow me away in terms of characterization, but I will say that personally, Dieck might be among my favorite ones. He has an incredibly cool backstory that connects nicely with the Regali family. His protective but stern father-like attitude towards his mercenaries strikes a chord with me, and I can sympathize with his plight of wanting to protect them, but at the same time not get too attached to them due to the nature of their profession. Overall, Dieck is a bit of a sad and tragic character, but also one that is easy to like and admire. 4 out of 5 stars. Dieck simply is badass. Right from the moment you see him, you know what kind of a man he's going to be. His design just screams rugged, battle-hardened mercenary. I do wish that his in-game model would reflect his portrait and actually fight bare-chested, but I understand why they didn't bother with it. Still, Dieck is simply amazing. His attire is exceedingly simple, but he does a great job conveying his character and personality, and his cipher art is some of the best I've ever seen personally. 5 out of 5 stars. Binding Blade's roster is filled with subpar to downright awful characters. When you have units like Volt, Bols, Wendy, Wade, and Lot hogging up space on the bench, a mercenary like Dieck that can one-round certain enemies seems like a godsend. He is the perfect mercenary, doing everything a mercenary is supposed to do. Hit hard and hit twice. His availability is great too, showing up on the second map, but he will start to drop off pretty fast, eventually on hard mode. and compared to some of the other units you'll get eventually, he'll start to seem a lot more average compared to how he is initially. I therefore rate Dieck 3 out of 5 stars, but I will note that on normal mode he's probably closer to a 4-star unit, as his bases will carry him much further there. Thank you so much for watching this Fire Emblem character spotlight. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and a comment, and also remember to click the stupid notification bell, it really helps out my channel a lot. Starting from this spotlight on, I'll be running a contest on Gleam for those who want to help share this spotlight and help my channel grow. To enter it, click the link in the video description. You can earn points by doing things like commenting on the video and retweeting it on Twitter, with bonus entries for my YouTube, Patreon, and Twitch subscribers. The prize is a $25 Google Play gift card, which is worth around 45 orbs and heroes. The contest will last for a week after the spotlight goes live, and you can do multiple entries each day, so in addition to helping my channel grow and make my videos reach more people, you can also earn yourself a nice prize in the process. It's a win-win situation. Go check it out. I would like to give a huge thank you to my amazing Patreon supporters. You guys are freaking amazing. Thank you so much for everything you do. By becoming a patron yourself, you help out the channel directly, and you also get access to many different rewards depending on your tier, such as a unique Discord role that grants you access to my Patreon lounge. If you become a silver tier patron today, you can request your very own Fire Emblem character spotlight, along with a drawing of your choice done personally by my designer Mina. Lastly, I want to thank my scriptwriter team, who consists of Sonagi, Heliosan, Mecha, and the newly added Lunaris. I have also linked any sources used in the spotlight in the video description below. If you want to see more spotlights, check out the playlist linked in front of you to see the previous ones I've done. Thank you for watching all the way to the end, you are a true fan. My name's Mangs, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye!